Fun to say, actually. High guard has been discussed a lot already. I'm a bit late to the show, but it's an attempt at a new gameplay loop, so I feel like I had to talk about it. What can we learn from this new attempt at the formula? And what was behind the instant dislike after the reveal at the Game Awards? To answer those questions, I want to look into the phases of High Guard as you progress through them. Speaking of phases, I'm here from the future, re-recording gameplay and adding to my review. High Guard devs surprised me while I was writing and editing my first iteration, and they dropped a 5v5 mode, a new character, a new map, a new base, and a major update with some changes. So I've been going back to play the game, see how it feels after those updates, and updating my review. So this is a little intro to that new review section. And I'll have more clips interspersed throughout the review with updated takes and stuff on different things. On the day I started this review, I focused it on it as a style of where did they go wrong type of video, with a simple metaphor of High Guard being like a charcuterie board, where they're handing you little pieces of other games, but none of them are quite as good as the source material. And in comparison, none of those pieces felt as substantial as a main course like the games they were adopting those features from. And the phases that make up the different pieces of the charcuterie board and split them out make those contrasts even starker. For example, the defense phase is a shallow base preparation phase that can't compare to the depth that you get in Rainbow Six Siege. The looting phase, or the gear up phase, feels like Apex without the tension of knowing a team could be around any corner. The sword fight phase feels like a quick game of Griffball from Halo that ends very quick. Mounts a confusing addition from Realm Royale, or possibly another game. That's the one that jumped to mind when I heard about the mounts in this game. The closest to being competitive with another game is the raid phase, and that could still use some refinement itself. Recent changes are addressing loophole issues and overall feel of the early to mid game, which are weaker than the raid phase, which I would call endgame of the phase structure. This is a promising sign that they're listening to feedback and making real changes. It does make me wonder if we have to optimize 2/3 of the game to get to the last third. Why not narrow the focus on the phase that has the most potential and nail it perfectly? Time will tell whether they can improve the early game enough not to drag on the game as a whole. And I have a couple ideas how that could change, and we'll go over those in the video, as well as why I think there was such a visceral reaction to the announcement of the game at the Game Awards. And moreover, the question top of mind, can they do enough to turn around public sentiment? Jeff's free slot at the Game Awards got at least 100,000 people eyes on, hands on, playing the game. But within the first day, 90,000 of those people left. That's 90,000 bad opinions of the game that doesn't seem to be coming back, and that's just on Steam. And did Jeff inadvertently kill a game by spotlighting it for free when maybe High Guard needed a free release or a beta drop so they could find these pain points and fix them before getting 100,000 eyes on it in the state that it dropped on day one? General notes that I noticed playing the game. So when you're loading into the game, you get a random map. You don't vote on the map itself. What you can pick is between 4 different bases for your team to defend on that map. And then you set your defenses on that base on whatever map you choose it. And I think the devs probably added this in the intention of adding mix and match gameplay, more diversity on maps, but I think it might actually end up having the opposite effect in the future. I think metas will develop on what is the best base maps in the game, and you'll see new maps feel old in the raid phase because everybody's choosing the meta base map. And you can balance for this by trying to figure out what makes those maps strong in the meta and make more like it, or changing the pools more regularly for the base selection. But in the competitive mode, they are locking you into a set of maps and a set of bases. So you will, I think, very easily see a meta develop in competitive for what the best base camp is, and everyone might be playing that on every map, making even new maps and different maps feel stale because everyone's using the same base camp for the raid portion, which is one of the most exciting portions of the game. So the first phase is the defense preparation. We go around, reinforce some walls, either around your defensible objectives, the bombs and the heart. There's 2 bombs sections and 1 heart, which could be instant loss if that one is taken. Or you can, create like a turtle area where you can poke out of windows and fight the team from there, and focus on keeping them from even pushing into your base. My overall opinion of this phase is it's too short for any real strategy around where you're putting the walls, and a bit too long to stop you from getting straight into the action. I also think it doesn't quite make sense that both teams start with a defense phase when only one team will actually be playing defense after the phase with the sword, where you summon the siege or some Grant to break down the wall. Criticize too much about this because it's very short. Honestly, I think it's almost a non-entity and just kind of a waste of time at the beginning of the round. But I think if you made it a bit longer and you added more strategy to it, besides just reinforcing walls, maybe trap gadgets or heroes with specific abilities that are leaning more towards defense capabilities for protecting buildings and walls or detecting enemies as they come into your buildings. I think you could make this more interesting if you took even more from Rainbow Six Siege, which is where I immediately thought, reinforcing walls is very similar to Siege's defense prep. Run around, reinforce a couple walls around your base that you want to be bulletproof, set some traps on the windows. I feel like there's more they could take from that game rather than just reinforce some walls, and now they take 2 rocket launchers to break, but really not that much difference. My other thought is, why is this phase here at the beginning for both teams when only one team will be playing defense that round? I think we could move this to after that sword round when you summon Grant in to break down the barrier. Make that a bit longer. Give the attacking team the benefit of looting around a little bit longer while that's going on, and have the defensive team then prepare their base for being raided. And, have Grant banging on the barrier, punch that audio up, drive up the tenseness of them having to get all their things prepped before Grant breaks through the barrier in like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever it is. Maybe that's a little too long. But I think that would draw up the intensity. With different mechanics to do for prepping, you'd have more diversity in defense playstyle. Another benefit to moving the first phase to after the sword fight phase, I think you could then, if you're not doing the prep your defenses phase, you could drop people in the center of the map to prepare, and draw them into more early engagements during looting, rather than immediately just looting the edges, pushing around, coming back to this crafting or the store area to buy your gear. And this is if you have to have the defense preparation round at all. It's so short right now, but if you were to improve this phase, that's how I think it could be done. Right now, it just feels kind of a waste at the beginning. You can always throw up a couple walls before they break in at the other round anyways. And every re-rotation or, loop of the phases, they basically skip this defense preparation round anyways. So it seems like even they acknowledge in the loop context that after that first iteration, they don't force you to stay in there and build your defenses before going out. It's still a bit frustrating to play that way. It feels a little handholdy. Like, oh no, you gotta stay in the base and prepare your thing for a defense round that you may not have if you win the sword. You may not have a defense round. Moving on to the looting phase. I kind of see this as a looting phase at first, and then a sub-phase of the sword fight. Looting phase is very Apex, you run around, open chests, mine some crystals, which is kind of like a crafting material, but this time you take it to a store and you buy instead of waiting on a craft timer. The weapons are Apex. I mean, basically it's the wingman. The Mastiff looks like a trenched shotgun. I found the R33, R301. I think they added maybe a couple guns that are new, but most of them I recognize from Apex. I mean, they don't look as cool. They don't feel as good to shoot, but definitely the shooting pattern is very similar. I know because I was with my first 2 wingman shots and hit the third. Q clip down below. And the shotgun, the Mastiff, is just 100% the Mastiff from Apex. Oh, and also armor and health regens. This round feels slow. You have the mounts to get around the map because it's larger than I would expect for a 3v3. It really feels like a solution to a problem that was invented. If you just made the maps tighter, I don't think you would need the mounts. If you made the loot denser, I don't think you would need the mounts. If you put more teams on the map, I don't think you would need the mounts. That aside, the mount running does feel pretty good. It's quick. You can shoot on it. It's pretty good, pretty good. And another thing is it makes the zip lines in the game kind of worthless. I mean, why would I get on the zip line when my horse is better? I'm not stuck in a linear path to something. I can just horse there. Or griffin there, or bear there, whatever. But yes, it feels wasted. Especially because they lock you from using your mount in certain areas in like the bigger combat zones. It's really only for traversing. So you get to the part where you're gonna fight over the sword, can't use your mounts there. You get to the base rating, can't use your mounts in the base rating section. And it's kind of similar to Realm Royale, where you have a horse you could equip and run around, and it can be shot out from under you. Though you couldn't shoot from that in that game, it kicked you off when you shot. So they did add a little bit of a mechanic there. But again, it feels limited because it's locked to certain areas, and I don't think you can use your abilities from the horse. I think you can shoot, but I don't think you can use abilities. By and large, this phase feels pretty slow. Maybe aggressive teams could push here and make it more interesting. But with only 2 3v3s, it just seems like everyone prioritizes looting, crafting, and getting the best gear they can for the phase start before they go fight for the sword and maybe go fight for the loot crate that drops randomly. But for most part, the looting is just boring. One of the updates devs have made to try and make the big maps feel smaller is the speed gates they have turned on all the time. And if you play any racing game, you drive through like a checkpoint and you get like a nitro boost to keep going to the next checkpoint. It's that, but for your mounts, your horses and wolves and stuff. There's just nobody looking for a fight at that time. They'd rather just loot up. And it feels like there should be more things to force people into facing each other. With the addition of 5v5 mode, you do get more early fights in the looting phase, just because they increased the loot value, but they didn't increase the amount. So 5v5, you have to push out more into areas to find enough loot to gear up your whole team, which I think is a good choice. If they had increased loot density as well, you would have had just people rolling around in groups of 5 and maybe not spreading out and still not finding each other on the map. And it honestly, the gear drop is just suck. It sucks. I could never find the guns I actually wanted from the random drops, so I ended up just getting crystals and then going back to the store and buying the gun that I wanted. Because was it the burst rifle? I really didn't like the burst rifle. But the R33 and the wingman, those were good. The trench gun, Mastiff was pretty good. I don't really like the auto wingman when you get like a gold wingman. Don't really like an auto revolver. It feels weird to me. Just to summarize, mounts are confusing. They solve the problem of the big map, but I feel like they invented that problem. They also have zip lines, which I think are worthless when you have mounts. And if you're ever to make new characters, like they want to release new characters for this game, any movement character that's created, like in the style of Apex movement characters, Pathfinder, those movement characters will have to compete with the horsepower movement mechanics on the ground. So either they're going to be maybe equivalent to the horse speed, or better, or worse. And if they're worse, then you're just going to ride your horse, right? That's a whole balancing mechanic that you have to do for movement characters. Maybe they plan never to make movement characters for this game, which I think would be a shame. They added a new character, which is a wolfman, proving me wrong about me saying they would maybe not add a movement character because they would have to compete with horse speed. They showed me they made a character that turns into a horse, or a wolf in this case. He's a werewolf. So he can run around at horse speed, and he has a leap attack that puts him an advantage over horse speed, so he can catch you and dehorse you. And then once he hits you with that, he also turns back into a human, and he can shoot you, and you get the stun of like falling off your horse. So you get caught by that, you're pretty fine. It's pretty strong ability in the mid to early game, but you gotta think this character loses that third of his ability pool when you get to the raid phase, where you can't turn into a horse or get on your horse. And in the sword fight areas, some of them are also like that. You can't get on your horse. So he's losing his kit in some areas. And I wonder if they're going to struggle with making movement characters in early to mid game, because they will all have to compete with horse speed. And they may make some movement characters maybe in the style of Apex, but that are more useful only in the raid phase, like grappling hooks or anything like that. Movement that's not faster than horses, but in areas where you can't use your horse, maybe they're advantages. At first I thought maybe they couldn't do movement characters at all, but if they segment them like this and like, you know, you give them bonuses in one phase and negatives in other phases, maybe that could work out. But it feels bad as that character, I feel like, in the raid phase to not have your mobility. That's another thing to talk about. Movement feels very Apex in this game. Slide jumping, pretty similar to Apex. I tried to do some wall bounces initially. It didn't seem like it was sticking. You know, jump against the wall, release WSD, tap space, and it was just kind of sliding down. But maybe I wasn't hitting it right. It's been a little bit since I played Apex. I did not try the super crouch or super mount slide. Maybe give that a try and see if that's possible. But it feels like they took some mechanics from Apex, but maybe not the best ones. And maybe then, you know, maybe that's a copyright issue. But I mean, it seems like they ripped the gun, so why can't they rip the movement? I think that's it for that phase. And then we get to the, I would call a sub phase within the looting phase. Or it could just be a brand new phase, the sword fight. I see this as very adjacent to like Griffball from Halo. You go get an objective, you fight over it, and then you pick it up, and then you have to take it to the enemy's team's space to score or get a chance to score. I think you get a couple points for just putting it in to the shield break and summoning ground. And then you have the chance to get more by detonating their protective areas. It seems like pretty one-sided usually. One team can get it and then run with it. And a couple times I had a couple 30-second minute fights over the sword, but nothing like super protracted. Notes on the sword fight phase, the 5v5 feel. It's still pretty fast, but you can be a lot more involved in fighting, pushing to the enemy's base, because if you kill 2 or 3 in an engagement, the other 2 are going to respawn by the time you're like on the next checkpoint to their base. So you get like a steady stream of resistance from the enemy team. And you know, maybe that's something that would happen more people get experience with that section. And you know, where the sword spawns, they'd have ways to add defenses or post up in spots before the sword spawns in. But so far, my experience, very quick sword fights. And then picking up the sword itself, you grab it, put it in the air, and you put it on your back. And the moment that happened to me, I was just like, what? I pick up the dope sword. I don't get to whack anybody with it. What the fuck? It's like, okay, so the only downside to picking up the sword is that you're flagged on the map. There's like a beacon in the air showing where you are, but you can still use your guns, you can still use your abilities, you can still get on your horse. There's like no debuff for picking up the sword. It doesn't force you into the melee of only having the sword to attack people with melee. So there's like no downside to holding the sword. You can just bum rush the enemy's base. I wish they had done something to debuff the person who picked up the sword. Slow you down, you can't use your horse, maybe it's too heavy. I mean, whatever reason you want to come up with, you can't use your horse because you're carrying the sword. Or you can't use your guns. But something to make it slightly disadvantageous to pick up the sword. Right now it's just completely cool. You have the sword, you put it on your back, can't even use it, and you go to the next thing. You just bum rush the base, because really that's all that matters. Get the sword, go to the enemy's base, and you're the attack team. And yeah, you can see them in the sky as they come across, because they've got the light beacon, but no other disadvantage to picking up the sword. And also, you still can't whack somebody with it. Like, come on, if you're gonna give me a dope sword, can you let me hit somebody with it before I get rid of it? It's like Chekhov's gun. You don't let me kill anybody with a sword. And then the final phase, which I think is where you see some of the real fun this game could be, the raid phase. This is what I call the finals gameplay phase, where you get the high-octane gameplay of the finals, breaking through walls, trying to capture or steal these bombs, because it's very much the steal mechanic from finals, except for the fact I think in finals the timer doesn't stop when you initiate the steal, whereas I definitely grabbed a bomb in like the last second and it stopped to the timer, and allowed me to defuse it. So I don't think that happens in finals. But that kind of gameplay, you have the quick reses because your souls float around and you can grab your teammates and drag them off and res them. The only thing I don't like about that particular gameplay is that the enemy can dismiss your res points, which I feel like you just really want to pump up the action here. Like this is like your main good gameplay part here. I think you should, a little similar to finals, just let them grab their teammates' res points and let them res if they can get the time to do it, and then give them a debuff or a time penalty on the timer of having the raid going if you wipe their full team. So every time you wipe their full-time team, they lose like 30 seconds or whatever it is from the timer that the raid goes on. But yeah, this is where I had some of the most fun fighting over this section. You know, just in and out, quick, high-octane gameplay. And then the other thing I forgot to discuss in the mechanics of the raid phase is they have dome splitters, which are like little daggers to go with the Excalibur, and you can use those to open any other section that you're raiding on the base besides the one that you use the sword on. And so it opens another window to their base, and it gives you a couple more spawns to your spawn pool to invade the base with. And the enemy team, if they clear you out, they can push outside their base and remove the dome splitter and reset you back to whatever spawns and interests you had. And the other change is, well, it's not a new change, but Mara's ultimate allows you to add a spawn point anywhere in their base, and that gives you extra respawns in there as well. So that allows you to extend the time that you're in the raid phase. Largely the most fun in this game is here, fighting in the raid section. Busting through walls, using your abilities and guns. It feels like this is kind of the dream. We've got finals gameplay with a little bit of siege defense wall system, with the Valorant's Apex Marvel Rivals abilities and the Apex guns and a little bit of the Apex movement. This is where I see what this game could be, and I wish they had just focused on this section. And right here, narrowed down their focus. And almost like Rainbow, just had switch attack rounds, defense rounds, attack rounds, defense rounds, and focus on this core section of gameplay, which is like Rainbow Six defense and attack with Valorant abilities, Apex guns and movement, breakable environments. I think this could have been a game. Minus in phase 1 and phase 2. Just focus on the raid section as a subsection of this. Either that or increase the teams. But then, you know, that begs the question, how do you do the raid section if you have more than 2 teams? Unless multiple raids can happen at a time, or there's multiple swords. Or, you know, teams could team up and try and knock out a team if the raid is going on one specific team or something. And I hope that's not what they're saving for competitive mode. I hope, man, if they had a version of this game where you could play with more teams and it was just crazier in the map, I hope they didn't hold it back for competitive mode, because first impressions are important. Another issue with the rezzing I see, you can grab your teammate's orb and you can kind of pull it while you res, and then they just res where they died. So if the enemy is aware of that, they can just watch where you grabbed his orb from, and then as soon as he reses, just kill him. It seems a bit of a weird mechanic. If you're gonna let me drag it, maybe res him where I dragged him to. Small quibble. If I were to return to this game, it would be for the raid phase. But the problem is that you got to play 2/3 of the game to get to the raid phase every round, and that's for a limited time. You know, like, you can't really fully, unless you go for the heart, you're just reset into the looting phase after the raid phase timer goes out, or if you win in outright. That's it. Favorite characters so far. Lately, since the updates and the changes, I've been enjoying the Mara character, which is the Reyna. She can give armor to her teammates and herself, and she can recharge that ability by getting kills and dismissing enemy revives. And it's just rewards you for getting kills with your gun. And her ult is dropping a spawn point, which is super strong in the raid phase, where you can just drop it next to the point you're trying to attack, or hide it where your team can spawn inside their base rather than from the outside. Really strong in that phase. Honestly, it might get nerfed if the game sticks around that long. I like the guy with the ice wall. He can put up the ice wall and kind of push it forward, uh, kind of like Harbor's wall, where it goes forward to block and you can check angles behind it. But it's breakable like Sage's wall. This is a cool idea. The only issue I have is as soon as that wall hits something, a little artifacting or other wall, real wall on the ground, the whole wall just breaks. If you could make the wall break in sections as it hit things, or more maybe stop if it hits like geometry that's on the map rather than like enemy attack or whatever, it would make more sense to me. But like I tried to push a wall just a little bit and it like contacted with a map wall and the whole wall just went up. It's like well, kind of wasted that ability now. That's just a small gripe on that ice wall, but I could go into the abilities of every character, and where I think they had kinds of inspiration, like that one character who can take enemy souls and give their teammates armor. That's Reverse Reyna, where she gives the armor to her teammates rather than herself when she gets kills. There's similar things like that. I feel like most characters you can figure out where they were influenced by. John Overwatch or whatever, John Highguard, has a very jet alt. He pops up in the air and hovers and throws projectiles. Assassin character also has a kind of jet knife throwing ability, which resets her cooldowns. And summoning characters to shoot for you, very Namor from Marvel Rivals. But I don't think the character abilities affect things too much. I mean, I think the character abilities are fine. I think it's the looping and the strict phases this game created, and the fact that the 2/3 of it is boring that really hurts this game in actual play. I think abilities of the characters are fine. I think the guns are decent. They could be better, but they're basically the guns from Apex. They look a little worse, and you don't get to really pick how they're customized. That's another bit of a complaint about the looting phase. The looting phase is pretty long, but all the guns are just predetermined. Like, sure, you go up in rarity, and each rarity has like a different feel to it, but I can't change anything about it. I can't make my wingman not an automatic. I can't make it, shatter rounds. There's no, for all the time they give you in the looting phase, there's not much customizability. They just kind of tailor things, and that's how I feel about most of the game. Is it's like, this is the defense phase, this is the looting phase, this is the loot progression. It just kind of holds your hand and kind of forces you to go through the motions. Or I wish it could trust you more like Apex does. Apex doesn't tell you when to loot or when to fight or when to push. It just throws you. You decide whether you want to loot or chase enemies to fight, or push to the next zone early. It feels like maybe that should have happened a bit in this game, but it's so firm in its structure. And I don't really know who that benefits other than maybe streamers. Streamers might like the dead time of the defense prepping and the looting phase to talk to chat. But I don't think you should build your game around dead time for streamer chat. And then there's another one with. So if we call the phases, each section as you go forward, then I would call when you repeat, that would be a loop, or the repetition of the phases. So loot tables throughout the loops. On the first loop, you have access to blue weapons, blue armor, blue helmet. And I think that's the best you can get in that phase. That maybe if you get the drop crate, maybe you get something better, but you can't get anything better in the stores. It doesn't seem like you can get anything better from the crates that are just spotted around, not the ones that drop on a parachute or whatever. And then that's all you can get for that round. So you can't get the best guns, the best armor, the best helmet in the first round. Second round loop. You can get purple. You can get purple armor, purple helmet, purple weapons, which are all a little bit better, a little bit more armor. And I believe on the third loop you can get gold or yellow or whatever it is. But my basic point is most games I played were kind of just wipeouts. There was one game I played that was pretty close, where we went back and forth a couple rounds, but you can only get like the best gear in continued loops. Like you have to beat off the attacking team from the defense side, and keep going to loops. But you don't get any of that gear for just straight wiping. So a lot of games, and it will depend how it breaks down, how many games are outright defeats on the first round, or have closer games. And maybe this will be not a non-issue in competitive because you have a couple closer games in competitive in general. But people playing your game will only experience white and blue items if they're getting blown out, or they're blowing out the other team. They're never going to see the purples or the golds until they get to a close game. And so that means the majority of your games are going to be played without your best items. So that makes the game overall feel worse for casual players, who I feel like are more likely to get in roles. Like this team is going to swamp that team, and it's going to go over in one round. But nobody gets to experience the best items in the game in that one round, only if you get into a sweaty match. So people playing casually may experience the loot very differently than the people who play competitively. I could see that being an issue. And maybe there needs to be more randomness to the loot rather than this tiered method. First round is whites and blues, second round's blues and purples, third round's purples and golds. Maybe there should be more. And I think you can get to reds. Maybe if you go one more round, you can get to reds. But maybe there needs to be more randomness to this, or some way you could possibly jump ranks if you did like an environmental challenge. The other thing is looting in general isn't very tense. Even fights themselves are very one-on-one. There's no threat of a third party like there is in Apex, where you're worried if you overextend, another team might come in and slap you for doing so, or take advantage of whoever wins the fight immediately to jump in. Without that being a threat, fights feel like you can poke, take your time, or push aggressively without worrying about that, which has its pros and cons. I think it makes the game overall less tense. I would love to see, if we're keeping these big giant maps and only 2 teams, some environmental bosses you could fight, or something to pull teams to fight each other during the looting phase, rather than just loot up, gear up, and prepare for the sword. It's such a long phase that's so boring. I wish there was more to draw you into fights with the other team, basically. Or if there's more teams that you'd run into naturally, or if you start them in the middle so they run into each other earlier. The whole phase is just boring. I think that covers my discussion of the phases. Light discussion on the characters' abilities, which I don't think have been... I don't know, the abilities could be better, but I don't think the character abilities are like what made or broke this game. I think it's the phase structure and the looping and the fact that 2/3 of it is just boring, or too slow at this point. Maybe there's ways they could speed it up and make it more interesting and more engaging. But none of this answers why, after the game released, there was such an instant dislike of Highguard. From just kind of a cinematic-ish trailer showing off some abilities, mechanics, why such a visceral reaction? And I think it comes down to a couple things. There were moments I enjoyed playing this game, but mostly when they reminded me of other games that they were borrowing from. And so, there's a couple good fights I had in the loot phase, or over the sword fight that reminded me of Apex. Some of the raid fights into the final phase reminded me of Finals. Some of the hectic, frenetic gameplay of Finals. Quick reses, continuing fights. But it was hard to think of a moment playing the game where I was like, oh, this feels like Highguard. And this is fun. This feels like Highguard's gameplay. The best parts were the parts that reminded me of other games. And I remember thinking that seeing the trailer too. I mean, I was already just kind of cataloging, oh, this mechanics from that game, that mechanics from this game. And sure, like the tank breaking down the barrier, that seems new. Maybe somebody else has done that, I don't know. And the mounted gameplay, yeah, that's kind of new as well. Although I think maybe it's been done in Fortnite or something. I don't follow Fortnite as close as I used to. But breaking down the barrier is only an entrance to the Rainbow Six Finals gameplay. And the horses are limited to just the wider area. You can't use them in combat zones. So when you're like fighting the most frenetic gameplay, you're not using that mechanic. So, and if it borrowed so much from all these other games, I wonder if they forgot that when you borrow something, you should iterate on it and make it better, rather than just like the combination of things does not itself make a better product, not always at least. Are the sum of the parts greater than the whole? And that's true when you have synergies and, things that come together to make it stronger. But with this phase structure, you break things you're taking from one game from the next section where you're taking from the other games and the next section where you're taking from the other games. How can you be synergistic when they're segmented? They're broken apart. And so when I play this game, do I ever feel like they do what they borrowed better than the game they borrowed it from? No, the Apex section doesn't feel better than Apex. The Finals section doesn't feel better than Finals. The defense section, like I said, is very shallow. There's not much time to do strategic stuff, and there's not much complexity for the defense team for setting up other than, what walls do you want to reinforce? And can you get a bunch of reinforce items to, put walls back up while you're defending? But again, this is all stuff you realize after playing the game. None of this answers what attributed to the instant dislike after the reveal at the Game Awards. And I think it may be because the top slot, the way the trailer was framed, being mostly cinematic and highlighting mechanics that were popular in other shooters for the past 10 years, it felt very corporate. And taking the top slot usually means you have a lot of money for the Game Awards. Now we know that slot was free, and Jeff gave it to them because he thought it was, a good up-and-coming game. But at the time, it looked like there was money behind this. And I think that may have given it an impression at the Game Awards that it was the next hero shooter being pushed by corporations, and that it was just the next one looking to make a buck. That was just, the next game that has $20 skins, and that's one side of it. It's that I feel like they just put everything they thought was good in the game without thinking about synergies, or how the phase breaking would make your game feel smaller in each piece and less than what you borrowed those mechanics from. And I also think that when developers leave big corporations, we have a bit of an expectation on them that they're going to make something vastly different from what they made at the corporation. They had to leave this company to make this game. But maybe that's a bit of an unreasonable expectation. The best thing that they're good at making is something that could compete with that big corporation that they just left. So maybe that's a bit of an unreasonable take, but I think that also contributed a bit to the opinion. Is like, if you're leaving a bigger corporation to make a game that looks very corporate, well, why'd you leave the big corporation? And I think as time goes on, we'll see the ways that they're not very corporate, like their quick response time, changing things within the first couple days of release with new balance, 5v5 mode, new character, new map, just pushing it out. I think we'll see more of how they're not corporate going forward. But I think that was the impression at the Game Awards, that it was the next hero shooter being pushed by corporations, and that it was just the next one looking to make a buck. They've already got so much word of mouth out from their day one release. I don't know if they can make back the public sentiment. But, I will keep an eye on this game and see how they keep up with it. Maybe we will see a No Man's Sky kind of comeback.